$35 at the time. And they were going to take them. So I saw them as I was going through Austin. They're now asking people about their diamond rings, their necklaces. They're downloading people's laptops. This is a prison induction. They're just getting you ready. Now I'm going to shut up and go to our guest. But I'm really freaked out about this because it's passed the Senate. It's now in the House. And the ATF, I was told this a month before the letter went out last year. I was the first to break the letter, just pointing out that we have sources. The ATF is now going to tell people that you can't sell semi-autos anymore. That is, they're discussing it next year. The NRA says they've gotten word that, quote, there's big gun control next year if Obama gets elected. The point is that I was told that they were going to tell people don't sell more than 2 guns to somebody in these 4 western states, Texas to California. And if you do, you've got to call the ATF, as if they don't already have a record of that through NICS. The point is it's getting you used to doing what you're told outside of law. Now, James, I didn't really tell you even when I was going to get you on about today. I just wanted to pick your brain about current events and talk about, you know, your research. But being in Army intelligence, seeing what's happening, I talk to military and police. A lot of them are finally waking up. But I see the system creating a cult of the military and the police, who they could care less about, taking their pension funds, you name it, to wear as a mantle around the tyranny. Ahead of trying to start some new civil war in this country. They tried to start the race war with the Trayvon Martin thing, but people aren't buying that. NBC editing the tape, the White House pushing it. I mean, I can just see the volatility. I've just been ranting while you've been on a hold about this IRS capital control and saying they're going to revoke your citizenship, basically, because that's what your passport is symbol of. It's a total right. I don't know of any culture that ever does that. On a case-by-case, for espionage, they take your passport. That's about it. Or when you're already out on bond. So they're saying, basically, you're all prisoners. And, of course, it'll be expanded. James Wesley Rawles, what do you make of this and all the other craziness, sir?
Well, we're living in very dangerous times. And when I saw the news reports about the IRS threatening to take people's passports, actually what popped into my mind was Jonestown and Jim Jones taking away all of the people at the camp's passports and locking them up in a couple of footlockers. We're verging on a society that's a police state at this point. And people need to wake up, and they need to get themselves prepared. If they're going to move overseas, they should take the gap soon. If they're going to hunker down here in the States, they need to get their beans, bullets, and Band-Aids squared away now, because those windows of opportunity are closing.
I hear you. Are you getting chills? I mean, and by chills, I mean, 10 years ago, I would feel the urgency a little bit. Now, it's blowing me away. Well,
the immediacy of it, I think, is almost overwhelming at this point. When I first drafted my first novel, Patriots, back in 1990, 1991, people looked at it as kind of wild speculation. But a lot of it, what was in there, has come to pass. We're living in increasingly dangerous times. We're entering into an age of deception and betrayal by our own government. And people need to recognize that. They need to, if they're not scared right now, they're not paying attention.
Very well said. I know you've got a lot of feelers out. Are you seeing people in the system starting to wake up like I am?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I have consulting clients right now that actually, are mid-level and low-level employees in national intelligence agencies, in the FBI, and amongst defense contractors and retiring military personnel. And they're looking for me for advice on where they should relocate. There's a lot of anxiety both inside and outside of the government right now.
Oh, God. But you know what's so nasty is it's not just some boss hog that wants to rob everything. These globalists are really nasty. They want to hurt people.
Well, yeah, they've made it very clear that the whole concept of national sovereignty is essentially out the window, that you no longer have the freedom to travel. You no longer have any banking privacy. And if the internationalists have it, the globalists have it their way, they'll take away our right to keep and bear arms as well. as you've mentioned many times, there's a large push underway at the supranational level for the Small Arms and Light Weapons Treaty, which, if enacted, would essentially erase our Second Amendment.
And they've said that treaties supersede the Constitution, which, of course, on record they don't. But they just lie and say that, kind of like they say the Second Amendment's a privilege or traveling's a privilege. You know, Corzine stealing billions, getting caught lying and not getting in trouble. I mean, they really are just trying to break our will right now. And how do you fight back against this type of infiltration? How do you fight back against such a long-term, patient game now about to come to fruition? I know we preemptively exposed them decades ago. You did, and others did. And that gives us...
They bought us some time, yes, but unfortunately, we are approaching the end game. And at this point, while I do recommend that people remain politically active, at this point, it's time to hunker down. It's time for individual families to team up with like-minded friends, pick out a defendable piece of land with plentiful water and good topsoil, and be ready to just ride out the storm, because it's coming.
All right, you've got the floor. Break down, because, again, I didn't read your novel till the mid-'90s, late '90s, 96, 97, and it even had contemporary characters in it, like, you know, Mark Kornke and people. Totally blew me away. And you know, what a collapse would look like, what an Agenda 21 would look like. You broke down, basically, and people say, well, why do they want to wreck it? Because they want to wreck it to try to consolidate it, and they risk overheating it too much and losing control.
Right.
But break down what you see happening, the scenarios you see unfolding, some of the different breaks there, how this could go in different directions.
Well, I think in the near future, we're likely to see, as you've mentioned, a derivatives collapse. And the counterparty risk there is huge. It's almost incalculable, because the number of derivatives that are in play measure in the hundreds of trillions of dollars. There's more derivatives in play than there is currency in the whole world. There's the economic risk is huge. If we see a repeat of the 2008 credit collapse, which is quite likely, there very well could be a banking collapse. There could be a stock market collapse, a collapse of the bond market. It could just be a house of cards coming down. There's a whole cascade of events that could bring our economy to its knees and bring commerce to a screeching halt. And as I've mentioned many times before, the crucial linchpin to watch is the power grid. If the power grid stays up, we may still have some semblance of order. But if the grid goes down, that will be the situation where the power brokers have basically lost control of their engineered collapse, and everyone's going to be in the same boat. We'll be in a massive die-off situation where literally more than half the population of the country could die over the course of one winter.
Oh, God. And by the way, the globalists have collapsed Argentina, and if that wasn't a warm area, they would have had, some say millions of dead. I mean, it was doctors for years eating out of trash bins. It's still happening down there. And just to interject something, when you talk about the controlled collapse, why are they at the same time buying up and shutting down power plants to make bigger profits for the ones they control? And causing blackouts? It's like they can't even, the elite have a plan, but they're so greedy, they're even destroying their own future. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. Well, unfortunately, the elitists have bought into the whole green revolution idea. But when you take the green revolution to its logical conclusion, you end up with people freezing in the dark, because you cut off virtually every power source, and the few that are left, like solar and wind power, are unreliable in terms of providing 24-hour-a-day grid power. If you get rid of all the coal-fired plants, all the hydro dams because they're killing little fishies, and get rid of all the natural gas-powered plants, all that leaves you with is solar and wind. And that's great when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, but it gives you nothing when the conditions aren't right. So we're going to end up in a third world situation where power is unreliable, and people need to be prepared to make their own power. And get themselves in a situation where if there's disruption of grid power, for example, I recommend people buy propane powered chest freezers rather than electric chest freezers, because I think the power is going to be so unreliable. We may have power failures that go on for not days but weeks, and if there's, of course, a total grid collapse, all bets are off.
And the government's been saying get ready for rolling blackouts. This is part of the new freedom. I just want to plug here that if people go to Infowars.com, they can get Survivors by James Wesley Rawles. All the orders get a free citizen rulebook with it. Also, Strategic Relocation, North American Guide to Safe Places, 3rd edition, incredibly valuable information.
Yeah, Joel Skousen's book is fantastic. I highly recommend that book.
And then also to understand why they're doing this, Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21, Rosa Corey, excellent, all available. You know, it's buoying, though, James, to see the city council woman in Houston trying to veto land grabs under Agenda 21 and saying it's Agenda 21. Again, there is an awakening. Please continue.
Yes, people are definitely waking up, and it's encouraging to see things like the Ron Paul campaign, for example. It's encouraging to see all of the free exchange of information that's going on the Internet, and I think that's one reason why there's all this talk of clamping down on the Internet is it has the Agenda 21 crowd running scared, because when you shine a light on this, it's like turning a light on in a apartment and having the cockroaches go scurrying. We're in a situation now where there's such a fast exchange of information on the Internet that it's essentially unstoppable, and unless they're able to control access to the Internet and track people on the Internet and clamp down on dark nets and people using VPN, for example, they basically can't. The genie is out of the bottle. They can't stop individual liberty unless they completely shut down the Internet, which at this point is impossible. So people are waking up. I'm glad to see so many grassroots organizations forming, and I'm glad to see people training and teaming up and preparing for the dark days ahead, because things could get very, very bad before they get better. And I think it's important that people team up. They've got to be in the right place at the right time with the right friends to get through this. And if people aren't thinking in those terms, if they aren't thinking strategically, then they're just going to end up another statistic, and they're just going to be another refugee on the road. And if the 20th century taught us anything, it's the life of a refugee is nasty, brutish, and short. You don't want to be a refugee. You want to plan your out now. People should relocate. Just previously, you mentioned Joel Skousen's book, Strategic Relocation. That's a fantastic book, and I highly recommend it because it gets people thinking along the lines of strategically putting themselves where they need to be for the dark times ahead. People need to make those moves now. You can't